Welcome to Getting Ghosted. This is an Intuitive Soul Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Horner. Hey everyone. So lately we've been talking about telepathy and all the weird and cool things that can happen with telepathic connections. And we've been talking about how telepathy is clearly very, very common. And one of the areas that I've been seeing this the most lately is people being like, oh my God, I'm hearing my guides, I'm hearing my loved ones, but it's like I'm not hearing them. It doesn't happen with sound. And I'm like, yeah, that's definitely them. But I'm hearing more and more people having bigger, longer conversations and connections or things coming through stream of consciousness. That is totally telepathy. Telepathy has to be a two-way conversation, but it's difficult to describe because it happens on a different frequency. So it can almost be like same time, like you have a thought as someone else at the same time. And so for some people, it's really frustrating because you can't always confirm it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about telepathy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about one of my recent discoveries with telepathy, or rather something that's been happening to me on and off throughout the years, but I've had more epiphanies about why it happens, how it happens, etc. lately. So we'll be talking about a little bit of telepathy and time tripping in this episode. So if you didn't see on TikTok, I recently shared that I had been deep in meditation and had some time travel telepathy-ish experiences. I have another episode that'll be coming out with some of these that I think is super fun and will be super interesting. And I'm also uploading some bonus episodes on my Patreon. I call them walk and talks. They're a little bit breathier because I'm walking and talking, but they're also really fun to listen to. So I hope you jump in there to get some of that little extra bonus things. Now, in terms of this experience, I was deep in meditation. I did not set any intention to connect to these people, but as I got deeper in meditation, I do often a specific process, and I have shifted and changed it throughout the years based on what I needed at different points in time. And I trust my guides and teachers. I've been doing this work for over 10 years, and I really trust my guides and teachers to guide my experiences, that I will be doing exactly what I need to do at any given point in time. Because remember, our guides and teachers are higher frequency beings. They know our soul plans. They know the whole ins and outs of how everything's interwoven together, everything we're meant to be here doing for each other, how we all intertwine, and they're not going to steer you wrong. So I really trust mine, and I've found that the more I just trust I really just trust them, that everything works out really well. Like it's like it intertwines with my own intuition, and my path just gets clearer and better. So in this meditation, it's hard to describe, but I was like going into this space I have where I enter. It's almost like a white space with doors. And in this white space with doors, or sometimes it turns into the universe, like I'm surrounded by the stars in the galaxy. I see this door open, and I'm aware that there's a being there. And this being was someone who immediately I was aware of their entire existence because they were communicating with me telepathically. The way I would describe them is they were wearing what looked like really beautiful Indian, as in like from India, traditional robes and saris. I was seeing specific jewels and crystals around their head, but beyond what you might normally see, I was seeing these crystals and jewels almost like implanted through their collarbones, into their arms, in different sorts of crowns around their head, or rather almost like wreaths, but they were joined with these really interesting, delicate. The only word I have in our vocabulary for it is metal, but I know that it's not a technology that we have here yet. And what they were showing me and telling me was all entirely telepathic. Like they did not move their mouths. They did not speak with words verbally. Because they are so advanced, because they're 6,000 to 7,000 years in the future. And again, I just knew this intimately or intrinsically because we were talking back and forth in our minds. But as we talked, it was like the second I would ask a question, the answer was already there. It was super cool because that's how telepathy is. It's almost like same time. So the way that I would describe them is they were very bright energetically, but they were still very human, right? So they were very much in the physical, but it was clear to me that they almost entirely speak via telepathy. And so they were showing me that this was much more efficient, and that over time humans had evolved so that our senses and our dimensional changes didn't really, it was almost like we didn't have to use our voices. They found that actually very inefficient to talk in regular conversation. And it wasn't just because it was slower. So when they're talking about inefficiency, they're not talking about speed. they're talking about how they were implying and telepathically communicating that it's really problematic to speak to each other in the way that we do now. Like now it's like, here's what we have to work with. And there are people who have telepathic abilities on Earth, and many of, like all of us could use them if we wanted to. But it was more so that they find us in our time period less efficient because they said, you have so many people who can hide things. There's so much, they said, once you begin to evolve as a species, you are going to begin to not need to use your words and your voice anymore. And there will be no differentiation between what you think and what you say. And they said, for us, we're completely transparent, just the same way that spirit is with you. Like when you're speaking with spirit, there is no lying, there is no judging, there is no doubting. And they said, because we've begun to enter a higher frequency. So we are all aware of our intrinsic connection. We're all aware that we are one because of our telepathic ability and the fact that we've evolved as a species to be able to do this. They were showing me being like fourth to fifth dimensional realm, but being able to integrate that into physical form. They were also showing me that they had other abilities that we wouldn't have now because we haven't dimensionally evolved enough yet. And so this is part of also intertwined with the crystals that they had, and they were almost like connected and embedded into their skin, but I was aware that they could interchange them and shift them, and that these metals and things they were using were like different technology, definitely not stuff we're going to be developing anytime in the next like 2,000 to 3,000 years. It felt like it was a ways off. And I know a lot of people got really excited when I posted this on TikTok about the crystals. I've been feeling called to do crystals, all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not evolved enough to use them the way that they need to be used. Not yet. And there's something about the technology and our energy frequency and vibration that needs to shift. As they were communicating with me, it's like I could feel and understand what they were saying. But again, a lot of what they had understood and figured out through their evolutionary processes was that they had to make a dimensional shift as beings, as people, in order to get to really reap the benefits of this crystalline technology. And they also had to go through certain technological advances and also, to a degree, simplifications in order to be able to do this. Now, collectively, because they have telepathic communication, no one's lying, fibbing, hiding anything, because they all would know, and because it would affect all of their frequency and vibration immediately for someone to have bad intention. And they said there are people who kind of like will bounce into different things, but immediately the rest of us can hold them telepathically and help them to almost clear and move that thought. It's almost like you transcend it really quickly. And I was like, that is really wild. And they said, so there's more harmony here. And there's less of this up and down, bad and good and evil type of thing. And it was really, really interesting talking with them, because the next thing they showed me was wild. And I was like, I've seen this before. I've wondered about this before, but I thought this was super cool. But they can talk to spirit, like actually have them in the room. So, and I thought to myself, this is something my guides have talked about a lot, that really for people who are working with the other side, like I do, and like so many of us are, because we all have the ability to channel the other side. We all have the ability to reach them. As you begin to shift interdimensionally, you can really sit there with your loved ones and guides as though they're right here. And they always say to me, we're not somewhere else, we're right here. We're just walking in different dimensional realities, and we're no longer in physical form, but we can project a physical countenance or a physical form to you for you to be more comfortable with. We understand who we were on Earth too, right? So after I was after my grandmother or great grandmother passed, like I can see her as herself, but I'm aware that she's an interdimensional essence that doesn't need to have a form all the time, right? So, but she can project that to me so I can understand it. They were showing me that they sat in council consistently with people who had said they just made their transition. It was a very natural thing for them to experience death then, and they did not have the mourning processes and the grieving processes to the same degree that we do now, because they were able to dimensionally shift and walk, quote unquote, between worlds as well. And because they had left just only existing in 3D reality all of the time, and they had sort of intertwined these higher dimensions here, they were not afraid of death, because when people, quote unquote, died there, they recognized that they had just shifted and changed form. And most of them had shifted and changed form. So they were very much, I saw their lifespans being a lot longer, because they did not need to have the death process the same way that we are having it now, because we're in 3D form only. And like many of us, again, we shift between different dimensional realities, like 4 and 5D all the time. Like we're always going up and down. There's no, like, we're not like in 2D anymore, but we're always shifting up and down. And people who are working with these higher gifts and abilities already are shifting in and out of it, especially nonverbal humans. And we heard about this on the telepathy tapes, right? So kind of coming back to that. And I've talked about some of my experiences. Like I've been connecting with John Paul, who was on the telepathy tapes, and his mom as well. Or I haven't spoken with her, but his mom was on the telepathy tapes, and there's different beings and people here who are non-physical or non-verbal, who are able to speak telepathically to other people. And there are more and more people who are going to be having more telepathy with their pets and stuff. And I've had those experiences, and I hear people talk about it all the time. And so it's a really interesting time period, because as I had this channeling, I was seeing so many things that were connected to things that we're seeing people experience now. But it's like right now, a lot of us aren't able to hold that energy and stay in those interdimensional forms without like feeling like we're losing, like our feet are leaving the ground a little bit. Like we're almost like, okay, we got to recenter, re-anchor. And they said, well, exactly. And so they were saying right now where we are, they were showing me you're in a space of different dimensionality. And they said, and that's okay. That's part of the evolutionary process right now. They found a lot of what I was saying very, like they were almost kind of giggling, but not in a mean way, more so in like a, like they remembered very easily that humans used to be like this. For them, it was just basic history. And they said, we don't actually need to study history, because in their dimensional form, in the far, far future, they don't need to study things. They get the luxury of learning them if they want them. And same thing with the spirit world. So I was seeing a lot of things that were connected to the way spirit has said things operate as well. So I thought that was really interesting. But they essentially said, because we're still in the 3D form, we can have time and space. Like we can use time and space, but we use them differently and we understand them differently. And so they can have actually, like when we talk about history, they know true history. They know the truth of things, but they don't dwell in history. So in the TikTok comments, so many people were like, ask them about what's going to happen right now. And they were kind of like, well, to us, and they said, well, think about it in your time frame. Like, when, like think about if you talked to someone 6,000 years ago from 2026, we would be like, oh, well, hey, things are going to be okay. Cause we're like, well, that was 6,000 years ago. I mean, we're not really focused on that now. Same thing for them. And everyone in my comments was like, kind of enraged about that. And I was like, hey guys, like, I understand, like we're here right now. You need to kind of think about this, like you got to be able to see with a bird's eye view a little bit more. And that's where people really get stuck in their emotions, and they let their emotions take over their decision making and cloud their judgment. And so you have to remember these people from the future were 6,000 years ago. They're not focused on our past. Like that's their past. Like for them, our current is not happening to them right now. Now they can walk, they were showing me they can walk in between worlds, and people were like, oh wait, so do they come back to our time period to see what we're doing? And they said, well, we can observe it, but why would we want to do that? And they said, think about your time period. Do you want to go back and observe? They said, we understand you do past life regressions. And they said, we believe that you should be doing more future progression type of meditations the way that I was. And they said, essentially, a lot of humans are beginning to make this evolutionary step, in a sense, not all the way to where they are, but we're bridging the gap because we've had so many people focused on past life regression. And this has been going on for like the last 20 years, right? At least, like I know a lot of this stuff started to start way back in, like, even I think the first cases, I might be butchering this, were way back maybe even in the 50s. I know like a lot of people are familiar with Seth Speaks, and there was a lot of, like, there were channelers even before that. But past life regression has become even more exciting and even more important lately, because not just because there's past life regression now, but because we can if we can channel past and we can look at past lives and do healing and understanding from past lives, we can channel people from the future. And I always say some of our guides and teachers are future humans and our future children and our future selves. And so it wasn't lost on me that, of course, they're coming to talk to us now about their experiences and what they believe and what they see and what they want us to understand. So again, they were telepathically communicating with me as well and teaching me, or sort of like answering my questions and telling me things about themselves. Like it was like before I could even ask the question, they were already answering it. Like they knew what I was going to ask. So another thing they showed me was they had used these crystals that were embedded for healing. Like these things help to maintain their vibration. They were able to hold this vibrational change on their own, but they used crystalline technology as well as some of, again, the only thing I can describe it as is metals, but that's not all it was. It was like light and sound frequency. They use light and sound frequency so much more because they understand it so much more than we do. They're going way beyond crystal singing bowls, you guys, like way, way beyond, being in certain cave environments. And they said the closest thing we have right now would be, they were showing me bells ringing, music that's on certain vibrational frequencies. And they said, but we have to be careful because there's a lot of subliminal messaging or certain words. And they said, and in addition, if it's through an electronic device, it won't have the same frequency charge as hearing it live. And I was like, oh my God, I know what you mean. You can hear it in your body when you hear it live. And they said exactly. And then they were showing me nature. So nature is like the closest thing that we have currently. We don't really have anything akin to what they were showing me yet though. And they said, there are some people who know how to access these frequencies. And so when they shift and meditate, it's like they have to go in deep meditation to do it. And I was like, okay, yes. And they can, that's where some people have spontaneous healing experiences, kind of like what I talked about. But again, I was like, I can't reach this all the time. Like, I mean, I could try, but it's just not something I can like make myself do all the time. Like, I mean, I still get sick. I still get colds, like stuff like that. And so they said, exactly, they use this crystalline technology that, again, it looked like almost like it was stuck to their skin somehow or implanted or embedded, but not in a painful way. And it helped them hold their frequency, energy, and vibration. And it would shift and change where they were, what ones they had. And I was like seeing stuff that we don't have on the planet. Like these were not crystals that we have here. Some of them where I was like, does that exist here? And they were like, no, this is not going to be here. Not yet. And some of it felt very ancient, like it was brought back or unearthed. And so another question that kind of came to mind for me was, well, how did your evolutionary process happen? And they said, well, part of it was solar. And this kind of kicked off a lot of discussion on TikTok. So as you can imagine, I was like, oh my God, I hope this video doesn't end up on the wrong side of TikTok. But what they essentially showed me and told me was, they said, well, almost everyone has similar skin tone and color here. And I said, oh, really? And again, these people were showing me they were from what would be like India. And they said, well, essentially, they wouldn't tell me a lot of detail on this because they understood that could engage fear frequency too much for us, right? But I was coming in this very open-mindedly. And because I was in a deep meditation, so when you do that deep meditation, a lot of your fear and your mind, like, let's go, your personality, let's go, your ego, let's go. And so I was really curious and just open-minded about it. And they showed me and said, well, essentially there were some events that happened. And because of the evolution and what was happening with certain things like the sun, and certain events with sunlight, there had been events that had happened and a natural evolutionary progression as well. And where there were no people who had lighter skin anymore because their skin could no longer handle sunlight. And because over time, a lot of people who would have been like, white or Caucasian is one of the things in the US, at least, that we can mark. So essentially like what had happened is, people who had fairer skin had ended up, meeting or procreating or marrying. They were showing like procreation with people who had, varying skin tones and more melanin in their skin. And that over time, evolutionarily as well, this just caused more and more people with light or white skin to kind of drop out of the evolutionary process. And in addition, because there were certain things, I had the sense that some of this might be going on because of frequency change and because of they were showing me the sun and solar things that were going on, the sun getting stronger. It might be certain events, but again, it didn't feel like it was like a catastrophic event. So I just want to mention that. Not saying things can't happen, but they didn't show me anything like that at this point in time. Okay. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. Just means they didn't show it to me at this point in time. Okay. So, but what they said was the sun had grown very strong and people who didn't have melanin in their skin couldn't handle the sun anymore. So I was seeing illnesses, almost like reactions to sunlight, where it was like people couldn't be out in the sun like at all if they had fairer skin. And over this, remember, these guys are from 6,000 to 7,000 years in the future. So there are things going on 6,000 to 7,000 years in the future where it's like, we would never be able to imagine. Think about people 6,000 to 7,000 years before now. Like they would not be able to imagine some of our technology, right? They would not be able to imagine how we live. They would not be able to imagine a lot of things we have in our homes, electricity, like really think about it, right? So there's a lot of things these guys will be talking about where we'd be like, well, I can't logically imagine that. Well, yeah, because you're not there yet. Like, there were things they were telling me where I was like, I can't even conceptualize that. Like they were trying to show me and I was like, I don't understand what that is because we don't live there yet. Right. So, it just like, you really have to think about it that way. So again, they were showing me and said, a lot of people just with fair skin, they didn't have enough melanin in their skin to be able to handle this. And they said our bodies evolved and changed to be able to handle greater light frequencies from the sun. And they said, and also from within the Earth's core, the Earth's crust. And they said, we're not talking about magma or anything like that. They said it was different. And they said, so our evolution matched with the sun's. And so everyone in the future has some degree of, from what I understood, it looked like it's not super, super, super dark skin. Again, it was just more of this in between. It just there weren't any people with fairer skin anymore. And for them, they were like, I was asking them about it. I was like, was this a problem? Like, were people upset about it? And they said, well, back in your time, yes. And I was like, okay, I could see that. And they said, but we began to understand as evolution happened that this wasn't a bad thing, that this was just like they said, we just understood this was part of the evolution. We stopped caring about things like that because people came together as we started to evolve and realize that we are all connected and we are all one. We lost our proclivity for war, violence, and separation. And therefore lack. So, and they said, as our frequencies changed, we no longer needed those things. We no longer needed to believe in all of this separation and fear because we understood that we're not actually separated. Like none of us are actually separated. They said, actually, like in your physics, you're not separated, which you already know as someone who channels. And I said, yeah, that's one of the first things my guides talked to me about. And I remember it felt like I was remembering it. It didn't feel like I was learning it. This was like, 10 plus years ago. And so one of the things they kept showing me was they said through time and through our evolutionary process, we essentially realized we don't need to believe in separation and war and violence because when we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. When we think about hurting others, we hurt ourselves. And they said, this is already known to a lot of people in your time frame. And so we want to remind you of this. And I said, that's a good lesson. That's a good reminder for a lot of people here. And they said, yes. And again, in the future, there's no need to harm or kill other people because the death process and how that is understood is very different for us. We're not trying to take over each other. We work in harmony with one another throughout the Earth's processes and the Earth's field. And I was like, there are so many people that are going to be relieved to hear that, but they won't be able to believe it. And they said, we know. Like they were just like, of course you can. Like they understood. They were like, yeah, we've learned about your time period. We understand you're in a different understanding of things there. And so they weren't like looking down on us. They just were like, yeah, we understand. And I want to say too, they also were smaller. And I was asking them, like one of the first things they said to me, which I thought was really interesting, was they don't eat meat anymore. And I said, well, do you eat plants? And they said, sometimes it's more of an absorption of their light energy. And they were showing them eating them, but it was very different. They were using, and this reminded me, if you guys have ever read the Celestine Prophecy, they talk about, transferring and sharing light and transferring and working with energy with plants in order to help the nutrients of the plants grow which I'm guessing that author knew somehow intuitively because he's a channeler. He wrote that back in like the 80s or 90s. I'm guessing he knew, like something in him knew that our plants would be losing nutrients because they're over farmed, modified, all this stuff. So a lot of our plants and our fruits and vegetables are starting to lose their nutrients, which is why we don't feel as full from them. It's why we don't, we're not doing as well. It's part of what's going on. It's a facet of it. It's not the whole picture of our health issues now. And so anyways, they were showing me, though, that they were like, oh, we wouldn't even, like, they were like, no, we don't eat meat. It was very matter of fact. And they live very in harmony with animals. And with plants, they live in harmony with plants and nature too. And they understand that plants and nature, they work in tandem with them. They're all part of the Earth's ecological system and processes. So there was no longer the feeling of a hierarchy, like whereas a lot of humans now think that they're above animals and above nature, and they're just here to use nature and use animals and blah, blah, blah. And we get to do what we want because animals are not less conscious than us. And this is why our telepathic communication is so important with animals, because it is going to change and evolve our processes and what we eat. But they said, but we also don't have like judgment. We don't judge things like that. We don't judge you for that. We understand how evolution happened and how history happened. So they weren't looking down on us for eating meat. They said really judgment is the main problem on the planet. And they said spiritually, you understand this already now because you get these messages from spirit. But we want to remind you of this because this is an important lesson for those of you who believe in fear and control, because fear and control creates the need for judgment. Because judgment comes from a space of us versus them and othering. And there's no need for that in the future. We don't have that anymore. And they said, again, there were people who wanted to hang on to that throughout the evolutionary process, throughout the last, thousands of years in the future. But they showed these people kind of dividing themselves out and fighting amongst themselves and eventually either evolving themselves or kind of dying out. And so they said, but it wasn't like we're judging you and you have to go over there and we're better than you. And they said, because then we would be just the same as them if we were looking down on them. And they said, but essentially what ended up happening is many of them began to just kind of have their own natural processes. And because we were shifting into these altered states dimension-wise, we understood that, which I thought was super interesting. Now, the other part of this, and I'm going to have to split this into multiple parts, but the other part of this I thought was super cool was they could, because they were, and kind of walking in these different dimensional realities, they could walk, they almost had these portal type of things where it was like a doorway and you could see a totally different world or land on the other side of the doorway. And I was like, that is so cool. Like, it's like, beam me up, Scotty. It reminded me of like something like from Harry Potter, except it's a literal doorway. You don't have to touch something or use a port key or, you know what I mean? Or use like flu powder or anything like that. You didn't have to get in an airplane. You didn't have to use a car. They could just go to these portal spots and they would be able to like transport to another location or another place. And they could change where that portal would take them to as well, which I thought was super, super, super cool. And they were also showing me technology where it was almost like they said, well, we don't really need the same technology. Like we don't need phones because we can communicate with each other. And they said also a lot of your technology in current time frame can be used well, but you're not using it well yet. And they said it's being used to lower your frequency and vibration currently, but that's not where it will go in the future. And they said your humans on Earth are more in that dominion and domination and control. And they said, but don't worry, they won't win. So they wanted us to know that as well. And they said, it was just very, again, matter of fact. And so, yeah, so I thought that part about the being able to teleport, like it's like basically teleportation, but again, what I saw was them like walking through a portal and then being somewhere else. And I said, is that how you contact me? And they said, well, yes, but we can also talk and communicate throughout space and time as well. And they said this whole like, oh, you're going to cause like a quantum wormhole collapsation, blah, blah, blah. They said, they kind of giggled and they were like, no, it's not going to fuck with things the way that you humans in your only 3D linear time space continuum think it would. You know what I mean? And they said, but it does have an impact. And they said, we are consciously aware of it more, of how we can impact things. So I'm going to pause this here for today and I'll come and do a part 2 if you guys want. And we'll talk about some of the other things that came through from them, other messages that they have if they want to come back through. Again, I did not reach out to them. They just kind of came through. I had been thinking about like, oh, I wonder, it would be kind of cool to hear from someone out in the future and see what they like way out in the future. And then, like I said, like a day or two later in meditation, all of a sudden, bam, here's this person from 6,000 to 7,000 years out. And yeah, super, super cool. If you have questions about it, feel free to submit those in the there's a link in the show notes that you can use, or you can also, send them in via email. There should be an email address in there and all of that fun stuff. Just a quick note too, if you are interested in learning about telepathic communication, either with people in the future, people in the past, people who have died are on the other side, loved ones of yours, spirit guides, or people that are here and now, or pets and plants that are here and now, you are welcome to come and join our Telepathy 101. It starts on March 20th. It's an 8-week course where we're going to be meeting just once a week on Fridays. It'll be a super fun course and class where you'll get to learn about ethical telepathic communication, and you'll learn what is telepathy, what is not, how to open up the telepathic doors safely, and how to protect your energy and create boundaries with it, what you might need to be doing to be able to hold that energy longer, so that I know a lot of people want to communicate with their loved ones on the other side, and your loved ones in spirit use telepathy all the time. That's why a lot of people don't realize they're connecting. And same thing with your guides. I know a lot of people are starting to have spontaneous experiences, and it's kind of like they feel a little cuckoo. You're not. You are definitely not imagining it. So that is open now, and I will link it up in the show notes. If you have questions, again, feel free to submit those in the forum in the link in the bio. Ooh, and other quick note, I just released some really fun tracking notepads. Your guides are always telling you to track your intuitions, write it all down. Notice what you're sensing, notice what you're feeling. Track your signs and your messages from the other side, write everything down. That'll really help you with development. So I created some notepads with prompts in them. All of these prompts will help you move through, notice what you're seeing, sensing, feeling, hearing, even smelling and tasting and touching. You will get to be like, oh, I got an intuitive download. Here's what happened, or here's who I think it's from, or here's the message I got. Here's what I think it meant, or I saw this in my mind's eye. Here's what it's connected to. And then you can also write down, here's what I found out it meant later. So it'll help you develop your skills and help you keep track. These are all 10-inch by 6-inch size. So they're a nice, like almost full sheet of paper size, but like a little bit smaller than that. So you have plenty of space to write. They come in some really cool, funky colors, really bright colors with a little bit of retro font. And I also have some that are lower visual stimuli where they're a nice, just like light, it's almost like a light beige, light pink, like in between a pink and a beige with black font, and white boxes to write in, just for people who like to have less visual stimuli in their house. They're a little more like, I guess, like the clean aesthetic or elegant looking. And then there's some that are more that like funky, bright, retro, gradient type of things. And you can choose from one of two. You can do the psychic scavenger hunt, which is for tracking psychic nudges and intuitions and all that fun stuff, or you can do the messages from the other side, or you can order both. You can also order some in bulk so that you can gift them to friends or sell them in your own shop. Just let me know if that is something that you want to do as well. But I will link those up in the show notes too, because I'm so excited about those. So anyhow, I hope you guys like this episode. If you have questions about anything, feel free to reach out, and go and have a wonderful, wonderful day.